I'm really delighted to be here today to have the opportunity in person to discuss with Kit to discuss her new book, Without Warning and Only Sometimes. I've been a fan of Kit's work since the very beginning with her debut novel, My Name is Leon, which was shortlisted for awards and won the Kerry Book of the Year in 2017 and has been adapted for TV this year. Well worth a watch if you can get your hands on it for the BBC. Her second book, A Trick to Time, was longlisted for the Women's Fiction Award, and she has an anthology of short stories and also edited a collection of short stories by authors, underprivileged authors and authors who wouldn't otherwise get the chance to be published. She has focused on fiction up until now, and as I said, this is her new book, Without Warning and Only Sometimes. Having read it, I know why it's called that, but would you like to explain a little bit about the title to the audience here today?
The title really reflects the chaos of my upbringing. So it wasn't all bad by any means. We had some good times, we had some bad times, and you would never know when those good times or bad times were going to happen. You might eat, you might not. You would definitely be cold, but occasionally you'd be warm. And it would happen, anything good or bad would happen without warning and only sometimes. And we just grew up, 5 of us, in a house where that was the norm. You would never be able to wake up and think there'll be breakfast. Or when you came in from school, there'd be food. You had no idea. The actual phrase, I think, in the book is when I'm living in a bedsit in Moseley, very bohemian part of Birmingham. And in my bedsit, which was in a great big Victorian house, there was, under the bedsit, there was a massive boiler. No heating in my room, but a massive boiler in the basement. And my Polish landlady would go down there sometimes and move these 2 files, and warm air would waft up, and I'd have to stand over the grate to get warm. And it happened without warning, or sometimes you'd hear the sound of the metal and you'd rush to the grate and stand there, and then these things would waft up. It was great. But that's the phrase in the book.
And that unpredictability features throughout the whole of your first 16 years of life, which are outlined in this book. In particular, what struck me is when your mum would go out sometimes for fish and chips, and she'd go and you'd all be at home starving, salivating over the thought of it, and she wouldn't come back.
No.
Sometimes might not.
She might not come back. She might come back with bags of fish and chips. She might come back with an orphan she'd found on the street. She might not come back for 4 hours. She might come back in 10 minutes because she's got distracted or thought about something else to do. So it was that sense of, and you'd say, Mum, you were going out for fish and chips. And she'd go, was I? And that was it. You just weren't going to eat for the day.
And likewise, then your father didn't cook most of the time, but then sometimes...
Then he'd cook banquets, you know, he'd just come in spontaneously with ingredients for everlasting food, and he'd make lots and lots of food, and you'd eat, and you knew if there was food in the house, you ate it. You ate it because there wouldn't be any tomorrow, there might not be any for a week. So you would just, and you'd be painful, but you just had to eat it. It doesn't even matter if you didn't like it, you ate it because it was there, and you ate it because you didn't know when you were going to get fed again.
So did that impact your life going forward? Is food still an interest? Do you like to cook? Do you like to bake?
I love to cook, I love to bake, I love to make bread, and it's safe to say that the 5 of us, we are ridiculously overstocked. You know, like when the pandemic was on and people going, oh my God, you better stock up. I thought, I've stocked up. I've been stocking up since I was 21. So I've got tins going, you know, they probably should be thrown away. I'm ridiculous. And also in our family, there is, if I walk into my brother's house now, I will walk in and I open the fridge. It's just a thing we do. I will go to my sister's house, I'll say, how are you? And I'll look in the fridge. And it's almost like a checking to see are they okay? Yeah. Have they got enough food? It's you know, I'd say all of us have also got food issues. You know, I've got two sisters who, you know, very overweight. I've got another sister who's very underweight, who micromanages her diet. My brother, you know, men don't have his as bad, so I'm not going to count him. But, you know, my own thing is I'm on an everlasting diet. Everlasting, you know, it's like, eat a lot, don't eat. You know, it's disproportionately present in my life.
But understandable also,
Yes.
given the circumstances. I mentioned earlier that up to this you've been writing fiction, and this is obviously a memoir. So how did that come about? Did you make a conscious decision?
No, I would never have written it. I was writing a novel, and a different publisher came along and said, would you write your memoir? And I said, I'm boring. I go to Tesco's, I garden, I bake, I knit. And she said, no, I really think you should. So anyway, I'm susceptible to flattery and hard cash. So I said, yeah, actually, I could write my memoir. And I knew that up to 21, 22, I had an unusual life. Post 22, I don't think I did. But yeah, while I wasn't making the decisions about my life, it was very interesting. So my memoir stops about the time I stopped taking drugs, actually. So it stops
later
there.
on. And the process of writing a memoir, is it very different to writing fiction?
Yeah, because you can't plot it. There's no plot. You're not in charge of the plot. It's happened. And if you're going to be truthful, which I think you should be in a memoir, then you have to just recount it as you experienced it, which I wanted to do. I didn't want to have the adult voice making sense of it. Yeah. It's just this happened, this happened, this happened. So it was when I was just working out what to say about my memoir and which incidents to recount, what I didn't realise is that what I was charting was not only my life, but I think the dissolution of my parents' marriage, which I didn't really know that was that present in it. So it starts off with my mother being, you know, deeply in love with my dad, who she'd basically worn down to get him to marry her. So there was that aspect of it, and then it charts a sort of souring, I think, of that, as well as my own journey through realising I wasn't going to die. That was my journey, was that I'm going to die, I'm not going to die. But I didn't know that until I had written it.
Right, that's interesting. So that became evident
Yes.
as you went through it.
Yes.
And so obviously when you write a memoir about your life, there are other people involved. And I'm just wondering, how did the rest of the family take to you writing about their lives?
Well, before I even accepted the commission, I got in touch with my brothers and sisters. I said, I've been asked to do this. Have I got your permission? This is their mom, their dad, their family, their secrets, all going out into the public domain. And they said yes. So I then wrote it. Took about 9 months. And when I'd finished it, and I got 70,000 words, I sent the 70,000 words to 5 of them. And I said, right, you've got the power of veto over any line, any word, any chapter. And if you write to me and you say page 76, that sentence or that chapter 7, it comes out. I will not negotiate with you and say, yes, it really did happen like that. It just comes out, and you will never hear from me again on that subject. So I send it on the Friday, and then I think there's 5 of them. If they all veto 10,000 words, I've got no fucking book. Yeah. So I was like waiting, thinking this is a disaster. Why was I so nice? And in the end, one sister wanted to veto 2 words.
2 words?
2 words. She just said, I don't like those 2 words. Out they came. And the rest of it, they all went, yes, that happened. That's how it was. And I would never have written this book without their blessing. Never, never, never. No. They're way too important.
But that was a very open-hearted and generous offer of you to say, no matter what, I'll take it out.
Yeah,
that was really important.
Yeah, really important for me. You know, this is what I'm happy to have out there is one thing, but you know, I've got the power over our narrative being in the world, and that's very unfair, very unbalanced. So it was really important for me that when people were discussing my childhood, black Nana, white Nana, they know that it's a true representation and they're not ashamed, they're not embarrassed. They had to be as celebratory about our surviving our childhood as I am.
Yeah, amazing. But it's amazing that you all, they all had the same memory as you, because I have only one brother and we had a pet jackdaw growing up, and we to this day will both fight over whose jackdaw. It was I found it. He says he found it, and but you had consensus on all the.
We do sort of. So we all agree on all the facts in the book. There's 5 of us. I've got one sister who's really a bit more sympathetic to my dad. I've got another sister who's a bit more soft about my mom, and then there's 3 of us that more or less broadly agree. So there are differences, but the differences are tonal as opposed to factual.
Yeah. So that's about the writing of the book, and so your life was going along until you were about age 6, and what happened then?
Then my mother became a Jehovah's Witness, which I can honestly say was an unmitigated disaster from my point of view. Not least because there was no Christmas and no birthdays. In fact, no celebrations whatsoever, no joy.
You didn't know what was inside a Christmas cracker?
I had no idea what was in a Christmas cracker. I had no idea about, fairy on a Christmas tree. I could see it on telly, the adverts, this time of the year, the adverts were there, mince pies, all stuff I never tasted from 6 till I left home. In fact, even when I left home, I wasn't interested in Christmas. I didn't have Christmas. I was sort of living a very, let's put a nice word on it, dissolute life. So Christmas wasn't in my vocabulary, but we had, I used to have my friends say, oh, you go back to school in January, what did you get for Christmas? Nothing. What did you get for your birthday? Nothing. What did you do for bonfire night? Nothing. What did you do for Easter? Nothing. It was ghastly. You can see I'm a bit sour about it still.
Do you celebrate them now?
Ridiculously. So my children have birthdays and half birthdays. Because a year's a long time when you're 5. So they have, there's your birthday, but halfway through the year, you have a mini birthday with a mini present. And of course, my children don't give a shit. I care. I'm trying to have my birthday. And at Christmas, the first year that I had the children, didn't really do much before that, but first year I had the children, I spent a fortune on antique baubles, antique angel, the biggest tree I could get in, those lights. I had to ask people what was bread sauce. I had no idea. It's the most foul thing I've ever tasted. But we had to have it. And we had to have St. Nicholas Day, and we had to have that on Christmas Day. And everything over the top. I buy my children way too many presents. They don't care. I care. I'm trying to reclaim my 7-year-old Christmas, my 8-year-old, my 9-year-old. I've got to stop. Obviously, it's unhealthy. And I've just about got to the point now, because my son left home last year, where I'm 62. I should be over this. I have got to the point where it doesn't matter. I've had my Christmases.
You've had your Christmases and birthdays.
Yeah.
And in the opening section of the book, I thought was very powerful in that the fear that you grew up with once your mum became a Jehovah's Witness, the fear that instilled in your 6-year-old self, terrified that you were going to die.
Yes.
Because she believed that the Earth was going to end in 1975.
Yes.
And the evil people would be swallowed up and the good would be left to enjoy paradise.
Yes.
But for you, that was a very scary proposition.
Very scary, because the notion of badness was, 10 Commandments plus. So don't lie, don't steal, don't blah, 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 blah. And so obviously you're a child, of course you lie, of course you steal a bit of sugar, biscuit, whatever. It was impossible. There's a scripture in, I think it's Romans chapter 2, verse 16, and talks about the sins of the heart. So it's the actual sin, the theft of the glasses, but there's the thinking about the theft of, you didn't do it, you didn't steal the glasses, but you thought about it, the sins of the heart. Who the fuck hasn't done a sin of the heart? Everyone's got the sins of the heart. But I took this literally. So I'm having sins of the heart all the time. And if I'm having sins of the heart, I'm going to die at Armageddon. So I grew up from the time I was 6, absolutely believing I would die. And I was going to, when Armageddon came, I would die. It was a fact. All of us did. We believed we were going to die.
Yeah. I'd love you to read a little section from here that tells us a little bit like how that impacted you, and was this it? I will die when the earthquakes start, and then to the end of the chapter.
I will die when the earthquakes start. I will be walking to school and the pavement will rumble and hiccup and a crack will start under my feet, small at first, and nobody else will realise what's happening, but I will know that the end has come. Then the road splits in a zigzag fracture and the tarmac breaks in half and the buses tip in and the cars and the lampposts. And if there are any women with prams, they'll tumble into, and dogs and motorbikes and trees and shops. And anyone walking home with bread or potatoes, in they'll go. Everyone who doesn't believe, or anyone who does believe but doesn't do as they should, in they'll go, toppling sideways into the chasm with their mouths open, screaming for forgiveness, but it's too late because they had their chance. We all had our chance. And when we are dead, the earth will close over us so the world can heal. I skipped the cracked paving stones on my way to school because it can start at any time, the wrath of God, any moment without warning. Stay on the watch. You do not know the day or the hour. Kim doesn't know, and Tracy doesn't know, nor Dean, nor Karen, not even Mom. So I stay alert, ready to straddle the split if it's too wide, or outrun it by dashing around the corner or in the opposite direction, or maybe straight inside someone's house begging them to save me. But even if I escape the earthquakes, there are so many other ways to die. The tower blocks will collapse, the lightning will strike, or the angels themselves, disguised as ordinary men, like when they came for Lot, like when they appeared to Abraham. They will call round to 70 Springfield Road, Moseley, Birmingham 13, looking for me. For me in particular, me by name. I will not be forgotten when the end comes. I live with the dread that one day, when my young muscles rebel and I can take no more stillness at the Kingdom Hall meetings, I can take no more of the brutal confinement of my very self, I will stand in the meeting and strip naked and burst out of my skin. Not today, please, not today. My breath becomes shallow. I tuck both hands under my thighs. I tuck it all inside, the guilt and the shame, the longing and the fear. All of it tucked under the 20-ton hush of the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses and Jehovah's omniscient eye. I won't burst out of my skin, though, until I am 21.
Wow. Powerful. How heavy is that for a 6-year-old to take on?
Very heavy. And very damaging, I would say.
Yeah. I'm sure it had an impact on your faith going forward.
Yes, I haven't got religious faith at all. I think I was brought up with such a very strong spiritual recognition of the importance of being a spiritual person. But I found it impossible, still find it impossible, to have anything to do with an organised religion and to have anybody standing at the front saying you will and you will not, and this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong. I cannot bear it. What I do genuinely miss is the structure that comes with faith and the place to go in the big moments of your life, the birth, the death, marriage, grief, sorrow, worry. If you can go somewhere and you believe that there is a book, that there is a person that can say, here's the answer, here's comfort, or that you can appeal to a being beyond yourself that might give you, I would love it. It's not condescending to say that, I just don't have it. And sometimes I would love to go to someone who says, go and say some prayers and you'll feel better. Go and say some prayers and you're forgiven. There's a lot of self-forgiveness and self-work. You've got to do all that work yourself. Sometimes you haven't got it. You're grieving or you're upset or you're tired or whatever it is. And to have somewhere to go must be wonderful. And I wish I had it. I just haven't got it.
Yeah. And what happened in 1975 when the world didn't end?
In 1975, when the world didn't end, I just thought it was late. So I was 15 in 1975, and I just thought, okay, it hasn't come. And collectively, Jehovah's Witnesses are all like, oh, you know, it's going to happen. And we're all waiting. And genuinely, people stockpiled food because they were waiting for the end to come and maybe we wouldn't have enough to eat. I'm waiting to die. So 1975, it doesn't come. 1976, it doesn't come. I'm still alive. And at 1976, I was sort of saying to my mother, I'm not going to the Jehovah's Witnesses meetings anymore. But I knew, I did believe. I would have said I didn't believe, but I did. So I left home in 1976 with the absolute certainty that Armageddon was just late. So I know I'm going to die. And if I'm going to die for stealing 10 pence and having a fag, I'm going to die for doing everything. Yeah. So sex, drugs and rock and roll, here we come. So I did go all out and I tried everything. What's that drug? I'll do that. What's that? I'll do that. I lived between 16 and 21. I think I moved house 10 times. I say house, squat, bed sit, couch surfing. It wasn't called couch surfing then, it was just called dossing. I tried every drug. I did everything. Because I'm waiting for the end, I'm waiting to die. And so I've just got to pack it in, I'm packing it in. 1977, it hasn't come. 1978, it hasn't come. 1979. By 1981, I'm fucked. I'm tired. I'm like, Jesus Christ, am I ever going to die? You know, and my head had gone. I was very unhealthy. I was probably 7 stone, probably 6 stone. Unfortunately, I would still like that. I was very fragile, didn't have great mental health, and I was just living a really shit life. I mean, it would be fair to say. So were my brothers and sisters, because we're all waiting for the bolt of lightning that's going to release us from our lifestyle.
And how did your mother talk about? Did it put a dent in her faith?
No, my mother died 4 years ago, completely waiting for the end. 2000 and whatever it was, 18. Armageddon's coming any minute now. She was 87 with dementia. But even if she didn't have dementia, she believed the end was coming any day now. Stay on the watch. Any moment, it's going to happen. And I was never going to leave school. The end was going to come before I left school. And here am I, 62. The end hasn't come. And I didn't say it to my mom. She was a bit fragile. She would have been very hurt. Yeah. I did occasionally say to her, it was going to be 1970. Oh, no, it's any day now. It's any day now. And we left her to it. We had to respect her religion.
Yeah. And a lot of this sounds very dark and damnation-y, but in the book itself, the stories you weave, the anecdotes you tell, the insights into the family, there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of that fun of growing up with the brothers and sisters and being let out the door to do your own thing. Yeah. And that's a lovely balance. There's a lovely balance with that.
Yeah, it was. There was such a lot of joy between us. My parents were both very uneducated people, and we used to make fun of them. By some quirk of DNA, they managed to have 5 very intelligent children, and they'd talk their nonsense, and we'd be nudging each other like, listen to them. We'd mock them. Terrible, I know, but we did it. We had fun with each other. We helped each other survive. We would help each other out of scrapes. If one of us ate, we all ate. You never came in the house with food and didn't feed one of your brothers and sisters, because we knew that's the only way we were going to be alive, is if we could rely on one another for everything, for our mental health, for our physical health, for food, for soccer, my parents would never be able to help us with homework, ever. So we would help one another just get through. We knew it would end either with Armageddon or when we left home. So we just got each other through those difficult times with a lot of laughter. I mean, we laughed at each other as well. And my mother's mental health wasn't great. She did some very bizarre things, like one summer, for no reason, she dressed my brother in lederhosen. This tiny little boy who was so thin. And she just came home with these lederhosen that frankly would have stood up on their own. Thick leather with a bib, red and green. And we just thought it was great. I mean, we loved it because we weren't wearing it. So she, you know, Dean was brought forward and we were like watching him put them on thinking, Jesus Christ, hot summer, his little legs wearing these, and nothing under it, just the bib on his body, and he was crying, and we loved it, And then another summer, for no reason, my mother bought a fur Davy Crockett hat and a mouth organ. And she sat on the back step and she learnt for the whole summer, without feeding us or anything, Beautiful Dreamer. So she'd have the mouth organ and she'd just be trying to learn Beautiful Dreamer. We were going, Mum, we're hungry. And she just paid no attention whatsoever. She would just, I mean, what the Davy Crockett hat has got to do with Beautiful Dreamer, I have no idea. But she would do very bizarre things like that. And she was immersed in it. You know, it wasn't that you could reach her. You couldn't reach her. She was gone into whatever bizarre. I mean, there was, you know, every year there was something. And we knew it was strange. Don't get me wrong, you know, like they say, children accept, you know, your childhood money. No, we knew that was not normal. And we'd, you know, we would go, what is she doing? You know, what's this about? You'd never find an answer.
Yeah. I'm struck by the incident where the day where she came, she was full of life and full of buzz, and she brought all the crayons and the paints and the paper, and she's starting this and starting, and called you all in, and you had this big buzzy day of arts and crafts. Yeah. And then the next day, she had shut in again, and the Satan voice.
Satan's voice. My mother had loads of different voices. Satan's voice was terrible. So she had this very light, manic voice. It would be saying, she'd go, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to have paints, and she would just get all these paints and crayons, and everything was great and light, and we'd be like loving it, but we knew there was the Satan's voice, and in the morning it was tidy up, you know, and you was like, oh, Satan's arrived. So you would have this joyous, beautiful time. We knew Satan was going to come sooner or later. And she would also have this bizarre, what would we call it, stress control, stress relief, where we used to have 3 bottles of milk delivered every day, and she would wash 2 and put them out for the milkman to return to the milkman. And one of them she would wash, and she'd put in this great big laundry basket, and the laundry basket would fill and fill and fill with empty milk bottles. And then one day, and it wasn't a day when there was any stress or anything, she would just pull it outside to a yard about this big. It's made of concrete. And she would take a milk bottle and she'd just smash it against the wall. And she would just do this over and over and over until all the milk bottles are gone. Not in temper. This was just a thing. And then she'd sweep it up and put the, I don't know what she did with the glass, and then she'd fill it up again. And so we'd just watch it fill up and we'd go, any day now, the milk bottles are going to get smashed. And it was just her way of coping with a very, very difficult life. She had a really hard life. And it was her outlet. I know I've got those milk bottles there to smash.
Yeah, she instinctually knew.
She'd need it. She knew she would need it eventually.
Yeah. From in your fiction, the characters in your books are really strong. But likewise, in this memoir, there are some fantastic characters.
Yes.
There's Black Nana, and then Irish Nana, and Uncle Mike. I love Uncle Mike.
Uncle Mike.
But again, he only appears without warning and only sometimes. But they really leap off the page.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about one of those or all of them?
My Irish grandmother. So we had 2 grandmothers, and we had Nana, who was Irish, and we had Black Nana, who was West Indian. And we called her Black Nana, not to her face. I mean, not to her face, to each other. And she had come over from the West, Black Nana came over from the West Indies to look after the children while my mother and father both went to work. And Black Nana wasn't. Black Nana really did not want my father to be with a white woman. She really didn't. White Nana had left Wexford, Irish Nana had left Wexford for a better life. And what you don't do when you come to a country for a better life is marry the only people that are under the Irish, who are the blacks. And so my mother hated the fact that, my grandmother hated the fact that her child was with a black man. So they really disliked one another. I can't remember a time actually when they were in the room at the same time, but they'd talk about each other to us. And Black Nana would get, you know, that white woman, blah, blah, blah. And White Nana would just say, you know, well, she didn't say much very much. She had a poisonous face whenever she was mentioned. And we could just see how alike they were. That was the same woman. One was black, one was white, but they had the same attitude. They believed everything that they did was right, that their children was with the wrong person. They both thought that that my parents shouldn't have children because we were neither fish nor fowl. We weren't black and we weren't white, we weren't Irish, we weren't Caribbean. And they both genuinely thought we would have no place in the world. They couldn't see the world as it is now, where to have, for a white person to have a black grandchild is nothing, or to have a child is nothing. But at the time, it was very unusual to be mixed race when I was born. There was very few mixed race people around, and both grandmothers were just horrified at our existence.
Yeah, yeah. But your characterization of them in the book is so strong that I could picture them completely.
Oh, yes.
Completely. And, but shocking also, some of the cruelty.
There's definitely...
When Black Nana made you clean out the rats from the shed, that was...
Yeah.
It was scary.
It was very scary. You know, I think about it now. And I mean, all of us, we laugh about it because it was, you know, we survived it. It was not healthy, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying it was a healthy way to learn resilience, but we do laugh about it. When the five of us are together, we talk about these anecdotes it's a form of therapy, but we do talk about it and we explain it over and over. In fact, it's painful for anyone else to be there because it's the same story told 100 times, and it's a way of us saying, yes, it was bad, but we survived, and we always end up laughing about it. I mean, just the other day, Dean was telling me again the story about the lederhosen, and he was saying that when he ran, his little legs would chafe because they'd get wet on the leather on the inside. I thought it was hilarious.
You have to wear them every day.
He wore them for the whole summer. When my mother decided on something, you did not take them off. He wore them every day. And we loved it. And there was 4 girls and 1 boy, and I can honestly say his life was a misery. So because my father, in a very true West Indian fashion, if you had a boy, the boy didn't do housework. The boy was the boy. You know, the girls could do work, the boy didn't. So when my dad was in, yeah, he could be the boy. When my dad went out, we used to dress him as a fairy. We used to dress his action men in Barbie clothes. We used to, generally speaking, abuse him in every single way possible. It was terrible. I mean, we loved him,
yeah.
Of course we did, but he had to suffer slightly.
I wonder what it was like for you to look, when writing the autobiography, to look back as an adult at all those episodes, but you've kind of talked about that a bit. But it must have also then, because you then narrated it as an audiobook.
Yes.
So that must have been another layer of revisiting those episodes. Yeah. So tell me about the process for doing the audiobook.
So with the audiobook, I was really looking forward to reading it, and I did not dare do a Wexford accent. I just thought I'll be marmalised if I try that. I could do my West Indian accent, I could do my dad, I could do the Brummie voice, I could even do my mum's Brummie Irish. I could not do my grandmother's. No, I was too embarrassed. So I left that alone. But when I was doing the narration, what I realised in talking in my father's voice, I really realised he was depressed. I didn't think he was depressed. I thought he was angry. All of my life, I thought he was angry. Actually saying the words, which I had never done before in his accent, I thought, oh, you're depressed. And it came quite forcefully to me. And for my mother, I just felt such sorrow for her that she's trying all these ways to be loved. She really wanted to be loved by my father above anything. Failing my father, her 5 children, and we sort of loved her. We didn't love her the way she wanted. We didn't adore her. Her mother didn't adore her. Her mother had 9 children and about 25 lodgers. So my mother didn't get loved. And she was looking for love, and to why she was a great candidate for this everlasting love that was going to come from God. So reading her voice, I felt such sorrow for her that she wasn't a loved woman. We all deserve to be loved, not just my mom, but I really saw the desperate measures she went through to be loved by us and how we didn't know it. We didn't see it at the time.
Yeah, so it must have been incredible then, as you were narrating your own story, to come upon these insights.
Yeah. And there were quite a few times where I couldn't talk for laughing. You know, I was, especially the bit like the lederhosen bit, I was trying to, you can hear it actually in the audio book. In the end, we just had to take one of the shit takes where I'm trying to keep it together and just get through it. And lots of other instances where we've done something wrong, or, you know, a couple of instances where I'm stoned at home. I wasn't often stoned at home, but one particular instance in the book where I've come home from college and I'm wrecked. I'm really stoned and I'm paranoid. Anyone that's had any drugs of any kind will know that quite quickly after the high comes the paranoia. And I walked into the kitchen in my house. Now, my parents never lived, they lived together in the same house. They were never a couple. They never sat at the table together. They never left the house together. They never went out together. And I come in and I'm already paranoid, and my parents are sitting at the table together. I was like, oh. I didn't know how to behave, and it was terrible. Anyway, I recount this in the book, and I couldn't get through it without laughing all over again. You know, I had the giggles all over again. I had the headiness of that incident all over again. It was a great experience.
Have you had any feedback from readers or listeners on this?
Yes, a lot of, well, I mean, the Brummie accent people like or hate. Loads of people hate it, but a lot of people like it. Loads of people talk about how different it was in the 60s. You know, we were poor. We were very, very poor, but lots of people were poor. There was a lot less material things just generally. So people really recognise those times. And, you know, in Birmingham, in England, you would see signs that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. And that's the world we lived in. So there's lots of Irish people say, yes, you know, we all, Irish people and Caribbean people, were shoved into the same small areas of Birmingham, and that was just the norm. And you know,
it's also the time of the Birmingham bombings, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and the Birmingham pub bombings in 1974. I have an identity as an Irish child, and I went to school the morning after the bombings, and we have this big announcement about the IRA, blah 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 blah, and I'm hearing all my school friends and teachers talking about the dirty Irish. And of course, they feel very free to say this in front of me. No one's going to look at me and think I'm Irish. So the dirty Irish, the terrorists, stupid, liars, thieves, murderers, you know, all this hatred said in front of me. And, you know, it was a real moment for me about whether I'm going to say I'm Irish. And I didn't. I was scared. I was intimidated. I still have guilt about that to this day. I didn't agree with anyone, but neither did I say no. That's a very particular, just like Muslims do today, where Muslims are targeted and all painted with the same brush about their politics. It's a small minority of people that believe a very small niche set of politics that lead them to do this, again, small niche thing. And I was hearing that firsthand and feeling that shame in some ways, rage, and feeling very attacked, and how misunderstood my people were. I can remember that very, very well. Obviously, as you get older, you understand that more, but as a child, I was 14. It was a very damaging thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I read that when you won the Kerry Book of the Year for My Name is Leon, that you donated the money towards a scholarship for underrepresented authors, and you advocate a lot
Yes.
for underrepresented, and I presume that comes from
Yes.
your experiences.
Oh, completely. For me, you know, I'd never read a book until I was in my 20s. I'd never voluntarily read a book. There were no books in our house. There was the News of the World, there was the Bible, 2 classics. And that was it. That was the reading material. You could read the Bible or nothing. And university, that word university, was only ever said in relation to University Challenge. That's the only time anyone mentioned university. The university was, you weren't going to go to university, it wasn't for you, even if we thought about it, which we didn't. So there were many routes, possibilities of life that were closed to us. And I went to university when I was 52 to do creative writing, which was shit, by the way. But anyway, I did, just put it out there. So I was 52 when I did that, and I was very intimidated on my first day. I thought I was going to come to a room a bit like this with, you know, leather armchair and a don with a coat. I can't believe that's my phone. So sorry, so sorry. You know, I had this Brideshead. That's where I'm going. I'm going to Brideshead. It was a 1960s building, and it was a classroom. It was, you know, it was such a different experience for me. And when I got my advance for My Name is Leon, what I wanted is for somebody who had no chance of going to university, no thoughts about university, to be given that chance. And I actually wanted to call the scholarship the Fat Chance Scholarship, because I used to say to people, go to university, you can go, and they'd say Fat Chance. My creative writing degree, when I did it in 2012, was 3,600. That degree now is £9,500. £9,500. Who's got the money? Who's got the time? You know, maybe if you've got the money and the time, maybe you're 14, you've got 3 kids and you've got 2 jobs. There's so many ways, so many barriers in front of people that want to have that opportunity. So that's what the scholarship was for.
When you then read the applications, you were just astonished.
Oh my God, the talent. And we only had in the end, we managed to make it into 2 scholarships over 2 years, which are now in its 5th year. But you'd read this, you know, the stories of people. And for a start, when we put out the call for people to apply for this scholarship, I said, you know, it's not the man, woman, black, disabled. You know, that doesn't cover marginalisation. I said that, you know, you could be a care leaver, a prison leaver, mental health, maybe you're, you know, you've got some kind of marginalisation there's no word for. There's not always a word for or a label for the ways in which we feel different from the mainstream. So I was just saying to people, tell me how you're not marginalised or why you haven't been. Maybe you just missed out through lots of tiny different circumstances. And anyway, the guy that we gave the scholarship to was a boxer, and he wrote poetry, and he was not ashamed, that's not the right word, embarrassed about writing poetry because he was a boxer, and he was like, you know, chunky unit. He was just massive bloke like this, writing these delicate little beautiful things, and he used to fold them up and put them in his boxing gloves because that's the only place they'd never be discovered. No. And he came to the interview because we interviewed 10 people in the end, and he came to the interview, and he was just, you know, it was a dream of a candidate. And we said to him, what are you going to do if you don't get the scholarship? And he said, I'm a writer. I'm going to continue to box, but I will always write. You don't have to give it to me. And it's like, it was done. It was done. I was like, it's you. It was you. It's exactly the sort of person that you want to be giving a chance to, that you want to say, you can do it. You know, someone that's he had no parental guidance. He had no one saying, you should write poetry. It was from inside out. And so for me, it was a joy, absolute joy.
Amazing. It's wonderful. Sheila, I'm just wondering, are we allowed, can we open it up to questions? Or I'm sure that, I mean, this is just, I could keep talking, keep asking, because it's just fascinating, and you have such wonderful ideas and thoughts. But I'm wondering if there's anybody in the audience then, if you'd like to put up your hand, if you have a question you'd like to ask Kit. Or have we covered all the ground?
Yeah.
Up here, this
Hiya, my name is Jack. I'm Liverpool Irish.
Okay.
But when I was growing up, even though all my family was Irish, I get the 1974 thing, but it wasn't celebrated, it wasn't recognised. The only Irish thing we had was my dad's record collection, which was the Bachelors, the Dubliners, and that was it. There was no other evidence. And we were Catholics, so we were all brought up as Catholics and not Irish. It was a definite thing. There were some families around Liverpool who did it, but the majority, there was no Irish identity. I just wonder whether that came through for you in Birmingham.
Yeah, we did. My grandfather used to play traditional Irish songs, and he used to have a fiddle and an accordion. So he used to sing a lot of Irish rebel songs, ballads, and I think we were Irish children. I wouldn't say we spoke about it. It's just every time we thought about who we were Irish, and we had my grandmother. She was very present in our lives, and there was 9 brothers and sisters, so 9 uncles. All my cousins were Irish, so there's a massive Irish identity that we had. Although, I'm a Brummie, I'm certainly from Birmingham, but I'd say we were brought up as Irish. I never went to Mass because of my mother's faith as Jehovah's Witness, so I didn't have the church thing going on. But I had everything else. We had Irish food, we had an Irish shop near us, and if you went to see my grandmother, you better not turn up empty-handed. So we had to have the Richmond sausages and the Kerrygold butter and all the rest. We had to turn up with whatever we were going to eat. She was not going to feed 5 children. There was a question of this man here.
I believe your name, Kit de Waal, is a pen name, yeah?
Yes.
Is it? I just wondered where it came from. Is it significant?
Yes. My own name is Mandy O'Loughlin. The O'Loughlin, which is Irish, is bizarrely my dad's name, who's from the West Indies. My mother's name is Doyle. So I did my DNA test recently, and I'm 55% Irish. So I think that extra 5% came from my dad. So when I was 8 years old, I was standing on a table a bit like this, and it had casters on it. And I was singing, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. And I was dancing around on it, and it slipped over, and I bit off my tongue. Not completely, but mostly. And I had to go to hospital, and they pulled it forward with forceps, and they sewed it back on. Hence, I've got a very long tongue, which I will not show you. But they pulled it forward, and they stitched it, and of course, it swelled up massively. And I couldn't speak properly for a long time. I talked like that. And when I was in recovery, I was chasing my sister around the garden, and I said, "Give me a kiss." So I didn't say kiss, I said, "Give me a kit." And so I got called Kit for a long, long time, actually. So that's the Kit bit, even though I'm called Kit and Mandy and Skins and Tola. In fact, in my family, everyone's got about 5 names. And if you get called by your proper name, something is very wrong. If my brother rang me up and said, "Hello, Mandy," I'd think someone had died. I'd be really worried. He calls me ugly for some reason, I'm not quite sure why. And the de Waal is, I used to be married to somebody called de Waal. And when I published my first book, I got it published as de Waal, and then I got divorced. So really, I should be Kit O'Loughlin. But it's too late now, so I'll just keep the de Waal.
Anybody else? Second row here.
Hi, I'm just curious because you said you didn't have any books in the house.
Yes.
And I have read your novels. I haven't read the memoir yet. So what inspired you to believe that you could become a writer? Was there something that shifted for you and that opened up that world for you? Because there's a big jump to coming to a creative writing degree. So just curious about that.
I started reading when I was 22. I got a job. I had mini sort of breakdown, I suppose. I had to go home. So I was living a dissolute life. I was My head had completely gone. One day I can remember very specifically thinking I was going mad. And I, you know, for all I've spoken about my mother's poor parenting and my father's poor parenting, and it was poor parenting, when I thought I was going mad, that's who I want. I wanted my mom. And I went to find my mom. She was working as a nurse. And I said, I'm going mad. And she said, you're not going mad. And she looked after me. My dad looked after me. And I got a job after that, first job I'd had, at the Crown Prosecution Service. And I was working for this solicitor. And I started to yawn when I was working with him. And he said, you know, are you yawning with worry or excitement? Are you not sleeping with worry or excitement? And I said, it's worry. And he said, you need to start reading. And so I said, just tell me, because I'd go to bed and I was like this, shaking and very, very anxious. So I just said, tell me your top 10 books. So he told me his top 10 books. I'm writing them because I'm just going to read to stop myself going mad. And what I didn't realise is he'd spent most of his life in the army. So he gives me the Red Badge of Courage, the Riddle of the Sands, the Siege of Krishnapur, all these military books. I mean, just I didn't know, obviously, I'm just writing them down. But he also gave me Madame Bovary and Thérèse Raquin, and I just went out and I bought the 10. And it's the first time I had been, normally if I was out of my head with wandering, it was bad stuff or it was worrying stuff, thinking I was going to die. This was the first time I'd been out of my head into a great place, into a good, safe imagination. And I just became an absolute obsessive reader. And I read and read and read and read. And I read like that for 30 years, you know, long, long time. And then when I adopted my little boy, Luke, so he was one, very ill child, and I gave up work for the first time since I'd started. And I just thought, oh, I'll become a writer. How hard can it be? Very hard is the answer. And I just thought, you know, I'll write a book. It'll take me about 6 months. I'll send it off to Penguin. They'll publish it. They'll put a wrapper on it. They'll put it in the shops, and that's it. You know, I'll do it. Oh my God, I couldn't believe how shit I was. I was really shocked that I couldn't do it. The difference between what was in here and what appeared on the page, I was shocked that I just couldn't make it work. So what followed was 10 years of try and fail, fail better, keep going, keep going. And so I went from super ego, I can do this, to, oh my God, I'm so crap. And that's a good journey to go on, I think, where you realise the limitations and you realise that your heroes, your Sebastian Barry, your Anne Enright, they've really worked at the craft. They don't just sit down and polish it off. And so I had to work at the craft. I had to earn my stripes. If you want to be a good writer, you've got to put the work in. Like any artisan has to, a carpenter, a musician, you know, you practice, you get things wrong. So that was me thinking I could be a writer. It was a very humbling experience, I can tell you.
That's a brilliant way to finish the discussion.
Thank
Some
you.
fantastic advice for any budding writer. So thanks so much to Kit de Waal for the discussion. Thank you.